I think the bit you have to avoid is just the playing for playing's sake. So even if you are experimenting and learning and innovating on maybe small things that you think might become bigger or might become more impactful, that they still have to have a purpose or an intent. It can't just be because I liked it or I thought it looked cool or, someone else did it. It always has to be tied back to there's a reason why I'm looking at this thing. There's a reason why I'm experimenting with it because I can see a tie into something good that it could do for us.
Welcome to Data and AI Mastery, the podcast where we bring you cutting-edge insights, practical advice, and inspiring stories from the leaders shaping the future of data and AI across the globe. I'm your host, Raoul-Gabriel Urma, founder of Cambridge Spark, the leader in transformational data and AI upskilling, career development, and progression. In each episode, I will be diving into real-world case studies of companies harnessing the power of AI to drive innovation, reduce costs, and create new business opportunities. So whether you are an aspiring data scientist, AI engineer, or seasoned executive, this show is designed to give you the tools and knowledge to stay ahead in a world where data is transforming every aspect of business. Stay ahead, stay inspired, stay masterful. Welcome to Data and AI Mastery.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Amazing. Really looking forward to our conversation, Sarah. You have such a fascinating background. Well, so Sarah, you're the Aviva's AI director. That's a really exciting role, and also former CISO. And I think that's such an amazing blend. So I do have to ask you, how did that come about? How did your career go into cybersecurity and then into AI?
Wow. So I think you could describe my career in sort of three areas. So one of those is leadership. I love leading teams. The second is transformation. So actually anything transformational, I am really drawn to. And the third is technology. And so actually when you think about those three things, it was the leadership, it was the technology, it was the transformation that drew me into cybersecurity. And that was where I specialized for, close to a decade, I think. But actually it's the same things that pulled me towards artificial intelligence, that opportunity to think broadly, to really transform an organization for the good. So those things kind of carried me through. They're very similar actually across the two areas.
And what sort of similarities?
So if you think about cybersecurity, you have to think quite broadly. You have to think people, process, technology. That is completely aligned with how you think about artificial intelligence. Again, it's people, process, technology. It's quite a broad spectrum of interest. It's the ever-changing nature of it. So in cybersecurity, you're constantly dealing with cyber criminals who are changing their tactics, who are upping their game. I often have described them as, if you take the kind of the criminality and the immorality and put it to one side, they're actually fantastic entrepreneurs. They are constantly evolving. They're constantly looking at different ways to do things and different ways to attack you. Now, fortunately with AI, we're not thinking about something attacking us, but we are thinking about something that's constantly evolving at a pace which is phenomenal. So you do have to think about that. What's happening next? And I love that energy. I just love that constant change, and I love that constant learning actually and curiosity. And I think to be successful in either one of cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and obviously there's a bit of an overlap between the two at times, you have to have that desire for what's coming down the road.
Amazing. When I think about cybersecurity, I think about, how can we secure the organization, how we can help, the workforce think about risks. And when I think about AI, I'm thinking about how do we drive innovation, how do we deliver new outcomes and impact for customers, externally or also internally. What sort of parallels do you see in terms of transformation? Because it feels like, when you transform the organization to be more secure, to innovate, there's a bunch of risks involved. And I just wonder if your background in cybersecurity and a sort of risk mindset, is really helpful when it comes to AI as well?
It is, because actually they're both about enabling. So I think one of the kind of the things that people often get wrong actually about cybersecurity is they think about it as, it's stopping stuff. And of course, you're trying to stop the attacks, but actually, the reason why you're trying to stop that happening is because you're trying to enable something for a business or enable something for a customer. You're not doing it to stop kind of business, because actually then you are stopping the business. It ceases to exist. So in that way, it's exactly the same, that you're trying to enable kind of the right things to happen. You're trying to enable the business to utilize the technology in the right manners, to drive the right outcomes and the right benefits, but you want to make it happen. So what you're looking for is what are the controls that need to be in place that make it as frictionless as possible? How do you educate people to use things well and to know what to do and what not to do? Because actually you want the outcome. So in that way, again, it's all enablement. You are enabling kind of the business to benefit from whatever it is you're doing, and you want that to happen.
I'm curious, how do you balance the risk reward trade-off? Because, if we think about AI, clearly it can drive a lot of customer value, but you're working with customer data, models are not perfect, they can still hallucinate, make things up. So I guess in the context of such a large scale, how do you balance, risk versus customer outcomes?
It is a balance, is the first thing to say, but you set really clear guardrails. So actually the outcome that you're trying to get to, so when you say we want to get a customer benefit, we want to do a really improved service or value proposition for a customer, but it's always with and we need to make sure that we do that safely. Because if you go for sort of a quick buck on something, which isn't what we would do, it's not what we're about as an organization, it's about that long-term value, then actually you won't get that if you do it without kind of the right controls and the right guardrails being in place. You might potentially lose customer trust, and that's something that we would never be comfortable doing. So you architect right from the start, and you don't look for an either or trade-off. You look to say, how do I reach that customer outcome with the right guardrails and controls and protections in place? And actually, if I can't do it with the right guardrails, controls, protections, then it's possibly not the right thing to be doing. And I think when you're very clear in terms of what's the outcome you're trying to get to and what does good look like, then actually it's not a trade-off, because they're one and the same thing. They're all requirements to get to a quality outcome. If I turn around to a customer and said, we've done this thing really, really quickly and really, really cheaply, but actually we didn't protect your data along the way, or we behaved unethically along the way, then that's not a good customer outcome. So actually, it's a total failure. That the good customer outcome is we've delivered something to you really quickly, and we've delivered it to you at a really good price point. Your data's been completely protected throughout that journey. We've managed it in a sustainable and an ethical manner. That's the customer outcome that they actually wanted. And if you define it in that manner right from the start, and you architect in that way right from the start, then actually you're generally in a good position. There's not a trade-off. That's how you do it well.
So what does it take in practice to, implement those sort of guardrails, the sort of red lines? How does that cascade through in the organization when, individuals are implementing projects? Would love to kind of understand, what does it take?
Yeah, so you have to think broadly. So technology, people, and process. You need to think about all three. Certainly for us, it has been core that you architect in the right guardrails and the right controls from day one. And so when you build out whatever the technology solutions are that you're using, how are you going to use the LLMs in your organization? Actually having those guardrails in right from the start is really important. The way that we approached that was actually that we built our own platform. We didn't build LLMs. We utilized kind of the industry leading LLMs, but we built a platform that meant that all of our scale productionized solutions are built out from that platform, and that inherently comes with the guardrails associated. So we made sure that we worked with the right third parties. We made sure that actually we put in transparency controls, hallucination controls right from day one. So you do have to architect in that manner, and you do have to invest and make sure that you set up in that way. You then need to think broadly, as mentioned, kind of process and people. They are all part of the solution. So how do you educate the people who are going to be using the different technologies or the different solutions? How do you make sure that you are helping them to understand a little bit about AI? How do they use these things? What should they see? If they see or think certain things, what do they do? Making sure that you've got processes aligned to that. So you do have to think broadly around it, but I don't think it's any different necessarily to delivering any other key transformation. You still have to think about people and process and technology. This is just a different technology that you're working with that comes with some different challenges and some different risks that you need to understand, and you need to make sure that you factor those in right from the start.
I hope you're enjoying today's conversation. If you're finding the insights useful, please do take a moment to subscribe to the Data and AI Mastery podcast and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Every new follow helps us reach more people and shed the incredible work being done by today's data and AI leader. All right, let's go back to the episode.
You said, Sarah, that it's really important to bring people on the journey, and I know you're a big advocate for internal upskilling, democratizing AI capability across the organization. So I'd love to ask you, why is that important, and what are some examples of what you're doing at Aviva?
Yeah. Oh God, it's a personal kind of angle. I completely believe in the democratization of AI, and it's certainly something that we've led with in Aviva as well. So why do I believe that? That's probably a bit of a multifaceted answer is the truth. Firstly, you can learn a lot from what's happened in the past. So if I use the digital revolution, actually what we saw there was people who had access to the right capabilities. There's a socio-economic advantage to that. So actually, culturally, broadly, I think people having access to things which are fundamentally a power for good in their lives, which I believe AI is a force for good, that is helpful and valuable for human beings and for people in general. So there's kind of almost on that level, I believe it. I also think that it's incredibly important for culture in the organization. There's so many headlines around about AI out there, and not all of them, some are true, some aren't, some are quite alarmist. I think the way to help people through that noise, and it's a lot, is to allow them to use things, to allow them to experience things, and to know and understand what that means for them in their day-to-day life. If you keep it as a thing over there that only a select group of people are using, I think that adds to the fear. Actually, I think that adds to the discomfort. Once you can see something yourself, once you can have a go at using it yourself, all of a sudden you go, oh, okay, actually I get that now. I can see why that's sensible. So that's sort of almost the second bit. And then the third bit is probably actually a bit more tied to the kind of commercial benefits. Maybe. I have never seen any kind of technology that you need to use. This is so almost humanistic in kind of how you chat to it. What I have found with just about everybody is they all have a aha moment when they get involved and they use it. And then they start to become more effective, and you start to see people welcoming actually the capability into their day-to-day roles. And I think if you don't do that, that's the commercial angle of it. Actually, you'll people will resist. So if you try to do something really brilliant across Aviva, it's a great customer outcome. It's a brilliant project. It's going to save time. It's going to save money. It's delivering a better outcome. If people feel scared about it, then you will have, I tend to say, organ rejection. Whether it's good or not, if they're scared of it, they'll just go, I don't want it. I don't want it. So you have to drive that kind of culture and that adoption and that sort of natural curiosity to actually get some of the commercial business benefits, as well as thinking about the sort of broader societal picture.
Oh, that's wonderful, Sarah. I love the passion. It's really coming across, and it's so good to hear so many initiatives being run to support, people on the journey, from learning to training to internal communities and forums to break down the barriers. I mean, that's really fantastic. I smiled when you said, it's an organ rejection. That's such a good analogy. You want to make sure people are supported. If you want to deliver your transformation, there's no other way. Which leads me to, I guess, the next question, right? Let's say you've got your technology sorted, you've got Rails, you've got, programs to support people on the journey. How do you go about identifying those use cases that, the business will benefit from? Could you give us some examples at Aviva? What gets you excited with AI?
We started very much with a view of we wanted to drive customer value and benefit. So we wanted to look for solutions that we believed would improve the customer experience, improve the customer journey. And so that, again, it drills you into an area quite easily, if you like. If you know that that's the outcome you're trying to get to, then you look for areas where you say, where is that potentially less efficient for a customer than it could be? Where is that slower? Or what is the problem that we want to solve? And that led us to some of our early successes. So one of the first things that we put into production and we scaled and then we shared out across multiple products and markets, very proud of that, was a claim summarisation solution. And just very simply, our claims handlers that talk directly to customers do an amazing job. But the first thing they have to do when a customer comes on the line is they have to get themselves familiar with that case. So who is this customer? Why are they calling in? What's the case history? What's happened already on this claim? And invariably, the way that they do that is they say, hello, Mr. Self, nice to see you. Just bear with me one moment whilst I get myself familiar with what's gone on. And they put the customer on hold and they read. And the customer sits there on hold. So actually, one of the first things we did was we used summarisation capability to provide those claims handlers a really succinct but accurate view of the case history, all in one place, really easily digestible, that they could take accurately and very quickly pick up to the customer. So it reduced those hold times by over 50%. So customer gets a far better experience. The claim handler loves it because actually they don't want to put a customer on hold. It was easier for them. It was better for the customer. Sounds really simple, but it's a great use of AI. Other ones that I love are things like our medical underwriting, which we're industry leading, very pleased to say around that. And again, this was supporting our medical underwriters. So we have a really inclusive medical underwriting policy at Aviva. We will, and that means that sometimes you are underwriting really complicated personal medical histories. And the way in which you do that and understand that is you look at a huge amount of data. So again, we delivered capability that meant that we were accelerating how the underwriters could go through that process with 99% accuracy, brilliant kind of service. And actually, we can therefore get back to customers more quickly. We can go through the process more quickly. We can be confident with the outcomes. And they're problems that you were they're well fitted for AI capability. So you've matched them together really nicely, but they had a really clear purpose and intent that was aligned to customer value and benefit. And you could measure that. You can measure how long a process takes you.
I love those two examples because you can drive efficiency and productivity while at the same time driving customer satisfaction. It's a double whammy, and those are always the best implementations. Look, here's a question, I guess more guidance for other organizations. You mentioned this sort of dilemma between experimentation and also production. How can you balance the two of them? Clearly, if you've got a couple of big bets that are going to drive business value, you're going to full in on them and you get them to production. But at the same time, you don't want to miss on experimenting and seeing what could work in the future. So how would you balance that, I guess, as a portfolio? Any guidance?
I think you used the right word. Actually, you talked about portfolio, and I think you immediately have to recognize that as in a portfolio, you need some of those different things. I think the bit you have to avoid is just the playing for playing's sake. So even if you are experimenting and learning and innovating on maybe small things that you think might become bigger or might become more impactful, that they still have to have a purpose or an intent. It can't just be because I liked it or I thought it looked cool or, someone else did it. It always has to be tied back to there's a reason why I'm looking at this thing. There's a reason why I'm experimenting with it because I can see a tie into something good that it could do for us. If you start everything with that intent, then actually it's helpful. And then you do carve it up into portfolio. You say, well, actually, what are the big ticket items which we really want to focus on that we believe are big transformational opportunities, and make sure that you carve out some time, some money, some capability and capacity to do the different things along the spectrum. I mean, I think that's where we're quite fortunate in sort of large businesses like ours, is we do work with brilliant people across, we have innovation teams, so you've got that capacity and you've got that, you've got those different skill sets recognized to do to do kind of those things at different ends of the scale. I think we're very fortunate in that, we've got amazing kind of transformation teams, business teams. We've got people whose job is focusing into innovation. I think that gives you a real advantage. I think if you're not in sort of the scale of organization that we're in, though, I go back to the word that you used, portfolio. Think of it as a portfolio and make sure that you carve out a little bit that goes along that spectrum, but do it all with a purpose. Do it all with a view that says, there's a reason why I'm bothering to do this in the first place. And if you can't articulate that in really clear, strategically aligned customer outcomes, then you're probably just playing with something that you wanted to have a play with.
Yeah, it sounds like we want to move out from just having fun, but really aligning to the business outcomes and the organization. So important to have this sort of framework. I guess everyone's really excited about AI. We've talked about the opportunities, the outcomes, but it'd be great to get your perspective on what are the remaining challenges and try and balance out a little bit the hype.
Gosh, I mean, I saw a really interesting thing the other day, and it was a graphic, and it basically showed kind of how many people kind of across the globe are utilizing AI and how many of them are utilizing it to sort of a deep extent. And if you imagine, it's a big box and it had sort of a blob in it for X many millions of people were represented in each blob. And it was only down at the tiny end down here that were actually people who were on that journey. And I share that because actually we are so early. So I think it's really hard to say, what are the challenges that we're yet to, because I think we're so early that there is a huge amount that we just don't know and we just don't understand yet. So you have to go into all of this with, I sort of often say to people two things, like curiosity and critical thinking. So really embracing kind of curiosity and critical thinking and recognizing that we are just at the beginning of this. There's a load of hype around it. And I think some of that hype will die down a little bit as well. I think some of that hype will start to kind of ebb away a little bit because people go, oh, hang on a minute, we're overhyping this thing. I then think we'll actually find that we're probably underhyping some other things and we just don't know them yet. They're just so early along that journey. I think another thing that often plays in my mind is I think kind of through digital revolution again, and I think about social media. I'm a mum. I've got two daughters, and so I think a lot about social media and kind of how do they utilize technology and be on platforms safely. And I'm an advocate for them using. I want them to use things safely and well. I often think back there, and I think if we knew now what we know about social media, if we knew that however many years ago, what would we have done differently then? And I often ask myself the same question with AI. It's an unanswerable question. I don't have the answer, by the way. But I think asking that question all the time, saying, what do we think that might be in the future? Where do we think that might go? Again, that goes to that critical thinking and curiosity is really important. What do we think we should do now that might be sensible for the future? And I think occasionally just putting the brakes on and having those thoughts and broad conversation is really important, because this isn't a technology thing. This is a society, people, the way we work, the way we live thing. And we all need to engage in that conversation and think about it and try and make as sensible a choices as we can, and recognize when maybe we didn't make a sensible choice that we need to just change that and do something differently. All of that is way easier said than done. But that is the nature of what we're dealing with here, is we need to recognize that it is big, it is monumental.
So, Sarah, can I take you to a quick fire round of questions? First question is, you mentioned aha moment earlier, so I do wonder, what was your moment when it comes to AI?
Do you know what? For me, it was really early on, actually. It was a ChatGPT thing, I'll be honest. I was playing around and I suddenly realized that I was enjoying the experience. I was getting back a quality of response that was different to what I'd had previously. And I suddenly, and I'd been involved for a while before that, but the aha moment was I think just the different emotion that I was feeling utilizing it. And there was something in that emotion that made me go, oh, this is really different. This isn't, just about clever technology. This is making me as a human being feel differently about the interaction, and it's making me feel a different level of value somehow in what I'm getting back. And that for me was the aha moment when it switched, I think, a bit from the sort of the this is very, very clever, mind-blowing technology to hang on a minute, this is fundamentally going to shift the way that I interact with technology as a human being. And if it's fundamentally going to shift the way that I interact, then actually that's true for everybody.
Hey, Sarah, it's been a real pleasure having you on the podcast today. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Really enjoyable conversation with Sarah today, Aviva's AI director. I loved her background experience in cybersecurity and AI and how we could draw parallel in those two worlds. At the end of the day, it's all about technology, people, and process, and you really need to align those three together to deliver a transformation. And clearly, Sarah is so passionate about people and how to bring them on the journey. So we discussed about the importance of training and also internal communities to ensure that everybody has a chance to be part of the AI transformation. Now, we also talked about a range of skills that are even more important in a world that is moving really fast. And, with AI, there's a lot of uncertainties. And those two skills were curiosity and critical thinking. Those are skills that are really worth investing in. Finally, what I really liked, we talked about a couple of use cases where AI can drive productivity and also drive customer value. So we talked about case summarization and underwriting. Usually you have one or the other one. In those two scenarios, you could drive efficiency, productivity, but also deliver beautiful outcome back to the customer. So thank you everybody for listening, and see you on the next episode.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Data and AI Mastery. If you found value in today's discussion, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an insight from the leaders driving the future of data and AI. And if you're a data and AI leader looking to upskill your workforce with the fundamental data and AI skills to transform your business, Cambridge Spark is here to guide you every step of the way. Be sure to reach out to us on LinkedIn or on our website, cambridgespark.com. Until then, be sure to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with data, and remember, mastery comes with continued learning and action. Until next time, stay ahead, stay inspired, and stay masterful.